This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good evening, everyone. A freilich in Chanukah, a guten Chodesh. Thank you for coming and joining us this evening for the learning of Torah Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbach. As always, we begin Rishus Mod Asra, Rav Landau, with continued appreciation to all of you for coming and gracing this year. We'd like to dedicate today's year. We do not have a sponsor, so we will dedicate it in appreciation to one of our Mishnah Yomis sponsors throughout our Mishnah Yom tour, the Applebaum, Richter, and Brody families who sponsor this year, Lili Nishma Shoshana Vita Bas Rabbi Yisrael Alevi. And as I mentioned, we are now learning. There are many, many more listeners than usual because we are learning now Pirkei Avos, so men, women, and children can join in together. It's a beautiful family thing to do, and we are in the second parak of Pirkei Avos now, middle of the second parak, and the free number to call to listen and to indulge is 718-906-6471. For those that have unmarried daughters in the house, especially if you have the girls like the menorah, so Zois Chanukah tomorrow night is a real special tefillah to Hashem, especially since it's a Gemar Din, that this should be the last time they light the menorah for a very long time. Because when they get married, they don't light the menorah anymore. So you tell them that this should be the last time you light the menorah for a very, very long time, and should be mispal for that they should find a Richter Gezivik, as we always do. We pray that everyone that needs their shidduch should find their shidduch quickly and easily. All those that are waiting children should be blessed with Zarachaya V'Kayama, healthy mommy, healthy baby. All those that are looking for parnasa, or better parnasa, should find it B'Revach V'Kavod, and all of us should enjoy lange gesunte Zisa Shalom Bayitz. Before starting the parasha, just one thought, L'Kavod Chanukah. All my life I'm singing Moshe slowly, as a bacher in yeshiva, beforehand as a child in my family's home, and of course with my children and then with my grandchildren. And I'll be honest with you, I said this all my life, and I never noticed. We sing Chel Paroi V'chol Zarai Yardu Ke'even Bimtzula. Chel Paroi V'chol Zarai Yardu Ke'even Bimtzula. So what does that mean? The armies of Paro, the warriors of Paro, and all his seed will sink like a rock to the deep. But it's not true. It wasn't Chol Zarai. Because Paro had a righteous daughter by the name of Bisya or Basya who didn't drown. So it's not Chel Paroi V'chol Zarai. Basya didn't drown. So the first thought that came to my mind is that it's poetic license. It says Chel Paroi V'chol Zarai. It rhymes. It's for meter. Really, it's not. And we do, in songs, we have certain poetic license. I told you once that that's what happens in Kadesh Urchatz. Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Magid Rachza, Moitzi Matzah, Marar Korech, Shulchan Orech. But it's not Shulchan Orech. We don't set the table now. It's a mitzvah that it should be Shulchan Aruch. It should be Aruch Mibayid Yom in order to Kadesh Lo Yiyashnu as Atinaikis. Right? That you should be able to go and eat right away. So why does it say Shulchan Orech? It should say Shulchan Aruch. But if it would say Marar Korech Shulchan Aruch, that would spoil the rhyme. At the time, I gave another answer. By the way, that the Devar Aaron, the Per Aaron, Hashem Yimkum Nami, he says that. It's because of the rhyme. At the time, if you remember, before Pesach, I gave another answer that it is Meduyik, because there's, if the Seder falls out on Motzei Shabbos, then you can't prepare it from before. Because then that would be Hachanim Shabbos L'Yom Tov. So then that has to be Shulchan Orech. my brother pointed out to me another inaccuracy in the song. It says, Kadesh Urchatz Kapas Yachatz Magid Rochta. Rochta is incorrect. It should say Magid Rechatz. Rochta means she washes. So Rochta is also incorrect. But it has to rhyme with Matzah. Right? Magid Rochta Moitzi Matzah. If it said Magid Rechatz Moitzi Matzah, that ruins the meter. So, you could say Chel Paroi V'chol Zaroi is for the meter. It's a Shvacha Teretz. So then I thought to myself, wow, it's a Pasha to answer. Basia wasn't alive anymore. I mean, there's a very good argument to say she wasn't alive, because Moshe Rabbeinu, when he left Mitzrayim, was 80. And Basia took him out when she was a baby, so she could have been 40 years old, 30 years old then. So that would make her now, by Kriyas Yamsuf, 110. Maybe she wasn't alive. Oh, wunderbar. And it's not a kash. It was Taka V'chol Zaroi. What about Basia? Basia wasn't alive. There's a problem with that. What's the problem? Because there's a Shitas Aguda brought down in Halacha. We don't paskin like it, but the Shitas Aguda is brought down that girls also have to fast or go to a siyum if they're a Bechorah, if they're the oldest, because there's a Medrash in Shmois Rabbah that says that Basia would have died because she was a Bechorah in Makas Bechoros, but she was saved because she saved Moshe Rabbeinu. So that means Basia was alive in Makas Bechoros, which was 7 days before Kriyas Yamsuf. So she was alive. Furthermore, the same Medrash says that Basia is one of the people that went alive to Gan Eden. So unless you say on the night of Makas Bechoros, instead of dying, she went alive to Gan Eden, and therefore she wasn't there by Kriyas Yamsuf, she was there by Kriyas Yamsuf. So again, it's not Chel Paroi V'chol Zaroi. So before we even get to the answer, the thing is, why didn't we have the kasha? I ask myself the same thing. I'm singing this all the time, Chel Paroi V'chol Zaroi, all my life. So there's two answers. One is a simplistic answer, but sometimes the simplistic answer is all the best. It means V'chol Zaroi that are males. Because those are the people that go to war. It's not like today, that we have women in the army. In the olden days, men went to war. So b'meila it means v'chol zaroi that went to war. Or another possible answer is that since we say Gershon is Gaya Kikotin Shenoi L'Dami, a ger that converts is like a newborn babe, and their ties are severed from their biological parents. Right? So it's Kikotin Shenoi L'Dami. It's a newborn babe. So therefore, she wasn't considered anymore Chol Zaroi. So even though Basia was alive, that's not a contradiction to Chel Paroi V'chol Zaroi, because she wasn't his Zaroi anymore. Gershon is Gaya Kikotin Shenoi L'Dami. That's also a plausible answer. Now, again, before we start the parasha, one more addendum. And that is, if you remember, we spoke last week about Haborek Ein Boi Mayim. And I thrilled you with the words of the Chidah that the bowl is empty, Ein Boi Mayim, Mayim Ein Boi, Avol Nechashim V'Akrovim Yesh Boi. Snakes and scorpions there were. And we said, how do you know there were snakes and scorpions? Maybe there were stones and wood. Maybe there was soya, maybe there was excrement, maybe there was garbage. How do you know snakes and scorpions? So I told you that the Chidah says an amazing thing. It says, V'aborek ein boi. Ein boi is exactly an abbreviation of avol nechashim v'akrovim yesh boi. Ein boi written Aleph Yud Nun Beis Vav is avol nechashim v'akrovim yesh boi. That's how you know. And then he says the next words are Vayeshvu lechel lechem. Vayeshvu lechel is to be read V'yesh by Vayeshvu is V'yesh by lechel. There were things in there that could eat him. That's what he said. So then we said, but even if you learn the pasuk that there were snakes and scorpions, so then the pasuk is paradoxical. It's hypocritical. It's not hypocritical. It's contradictory because it says abor reik ain't by mine. So if there were nechashim and akrabim, there wasn't reik. So then why does it say reik? So the teretz that the Rishonim say is that when the brothers lowered him in there, they didn't see the snakes and scorpions. The snakes and scorpions were in crevices and cracks. Because after all, they said, why should we kill our brother? What profit do we have? Right? So they didn't want to kill him. They didn't see it. So Abarek, to their vision, it was empty. The snakes came out afterwards. But last week I spoke in the Belhavi Yeshiva, and one of the Rebbeim in the Belhavi Yeshiva told me a beautiful pshat. Beautiful pshat. He says, what's the definition of reik? Reik doesn't mean necessarily with nothing. Reik means when something doesn't have what it's supposed to have. Then that person is a reik. So the bar is supposed to have water. It's a reservoir. It's a cistern. If it doesn't have water, it's considered reik even if it has nechashim akrav. If you think about it, we say about the Amaratzim, afilu reikonim shebahen, even the empty ones amongst you, mole mitzvahs kiriman, are full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. What do you mean empty? They're not empty. They know the baseball scores. Right? They have a lot of stuff in their head. But a Jew's head is not supposed to be full with junk. So you're considered a reikon even if you got stuff in there. But if it's not what you're supposed to have in there, that's reik. A bar is supposed to be stored with water. If it doesn't have what it's supposed to have, that's reik. It's like there's a Rashi that says, that calls stunted grapes Rishei Anovim. So Rashi says, why are these wintered grapes called Rishon? Because they never ripen. A person that never fulfills his potential, her potential is a Rasha. So these grapes that never ripen, they never fulfill their potential, so they're Rishon. And that's a rake. We call a person is a rake. Because if a person doesn't fulfill their potential, if they don't have what they're supposed to have, that's empty. Even though if it's not in reality empty, there's stuff in there. If you fill a huge gas tank with splinters, that's an empty gas tank. But it's not empty, it has splinters. But it's empty. Okay, let's get to the parsha now. Yaakov tells the brothers, when they want to argue that they should bring down Binyamin, Vayetze ha'echad me'iti. One of the brothers left me. V'amar, and it was told to me, Ach Torah, that he was torn apart. V'lo yi'isiv adheina, and I haven't seen him till now. So here Yaakov tips his hand that, I have a feeling he's not dead. But v'lo yi'isiv adheina. So the Sam Sofer over here says a moyudik thing. Sam Sofer is a tzaddik b'bracha s'chusi yagen aleinu. He says that Yaakov said, I know that Yosef is still alive. Why? So we would have thought that the Sam Sofer would say one of two reasons. The first is because of the dreams. V'aviv shamar es hadavar. He was waiting for the dreams to be fulfilled, right? The sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing down to Yosef. He was waiting for the dreams to be fulfilled. Or we would say because Vayinoim lisnachem. I can't get over it. And a mace is mishtakech min alev after 12 months. And I'm not forgetting. So we would think that was one of the two reasons that the Chassam Sofer would say. He says neither of those two reasons. He says a third reason. Got to hear the reason that he says. He says, because I never saw Yosef in a dream. And if Yosef would be in the next world, he would have already come to me in a dream. So I know that he's not dead. That's what Chassam Sofer says. Fascinating, Chassam Sofer. So he says, Ach tarov tarov. Now we always translate it to mean torn, like a treifa. Basa basada treifa. But the Chassam Sofer says that Yaakov says, I'm afraid that he was bitten by the dangerous animal called a bardalus. Now it's amazing when you look at the Rishonim on bardalus. There's so many different pshatim in bardalus, ranging from a skunk to a hyena to a leopard. The Chassam Sofer says that one shot in bardalus is that it's a dangerous animal that causes the person that it bites to go mad, to go insane. So he was worried that Yosef was wandering around Maturaf Badas, insane. And he says that shot Ach Toraf Yosef. That Yosef is Maturaf Badas. And that's why he's not coming home, and that's why we can't find him. That's what he was worried about. Scary thing. Vayomer Yosef el Echav. Yosef said to his brothers, Geshu na elai. Come close to me. So Rashi says over here, he says, come close. And to prove who he was, he showed them that he was mohel. He showed them that he was circumcised. Now, there's a very pashut kasha over here that the Torah asks. What does it prove that he was circumcised? There was a decree that Yosef made that if you want food, everybody had to circumcise themselves. And as a matter of fact, that decree caused the Mitzrim to go running to Paro and saying, listen, this guy's up to no good, this new viceroy. We heard this trick before. It was done in the city of Shechem, and they wiped out the entire city. We were afraid of this. So Paro said to him, what are you afraid of? Where's your food? He told you to say food. Where's your food? It's spoiled. His didn't. He's a master mechashev. He has to resort to tricks if he wants you to kill you. He tells you to circumcise yourself, circumcise yourself. So ask the Torah, everybody was circumcised in Mitzrayim. So what's the proof that Yosef was mohel? Oh, by the way, as an aside, if Yosef was an Egyptian, what was the reason that he gave for having everybody circumcised? And for that matter, even as Yosef, what does he need Goyim to be circumcised for? He needs Egyptians to be circumcised. So the Taisus HaRosh asks this kasha, and the Taisus HaRosh says, it's a very interesting answer. The Taisus HaRosh says that Yosef held lahalacha that the Bnei Keturah, Avram's children, the Bnei Keturah, had a chi of Mila. And he felt that scattered through Egypt were from the Bnei Keturah. And therefore he decreed on all of Egypt that they should mal themselves because of the Bnei Keturah. The Maral says a different answer. Maral says the famous answer that Yosef knew that there was a time that the Bnei Yisrael would come down to Mitzrayim and that they would start to assimilate. And if the Egyptians were not circumcised, they would also not want to circumcise themselves. So therefore Yosef enacted that the Egyptians should circumcise so that the Yidden shouldn't have a reason not to circumcise themselves. And that's why the Medrash says, Kishemeis Yosef Heiferu Bris Milah. Once Yosef died, and that decree that the Egyptians should mal themselves stopped. So now the Jews, Heiferu Bris Milah, Amru Niyim Kimetziim, we want to be like the Egyptians. This is the foresight of Gedolei Yisrael. It's the foresight of Yosef. It's interesting that, so therefore the question is, what was the proof that Yosef was Mal? So you could learn that what Yosef was showing them is, don't you understand? That's why I made a decree about circumcision, because I'm Yosef. Otherwise, why would I make a decree about circumcision? But the Shach al Torah, which was written about 500 years ago, famous sefer, it's not Shach al Shulchan Aruch, Shach al Torah. Shach al Torah says that Yosef was one of the either 7, there's a whole bunch of different numbers, 13, 11. It was one of those that were Noilid Mohel. And the Shach says that somebody that's Noilid Mohel, his Mila looks different than somebody that's come out. So when he showed it to them, he said, look, I'm Yosef, you know I was Noilid Mohel. You could see. Or you could add, I thought to myself, that somebody that's Noilid Mohel has to have Atofas Dam Bris. And there's a mark left from the Atofas Dam Bris. And he showed him the Atofas Dam Bris. Okay. And I want to share with you something very interesting. L'kulam nosan, to all of them he gave lo ish chalifos smolas, an exchange of clothing. He opened up the royal wardrobe, he got the royal tailor, and he gave them each an exchange of clothing. So there's several questions over here. It should say l'kulam nosan smolas. What's chalifos smolas? An exchange. They were wearing clothing. Furthermore, Vos Epistedi started handing out clothing. They came for food, I understand, wasn't giving them clothing. And then what's the Lashon Simla? What's wrong with begodim? What's the Simla? So, the Paneach Rosa and the Chizkuni both ask, why does it say Chalifos? And they say that Yosef was giving them an exchange because when Yosef planted the Gevia, his magical goblet, into the Amtachas Binyamin, and they were apprehended, and they found the Gevia, so they all tore their clothing. So Yosef said, I caused you to tear your clothing. Here I'm giving you a Khalifa, I'm giving you new clothing in exchange. I caused you. I was the Goyim, I caused you to tear your clothing. So I'm giving you a Khalifa smaller. It's very partial. I'm giving you a Khalifa and giving an exchange. It could be, that's why Simla is used, because Simla is Hashole. It's whole. Right? So he's giving him a beged that's whole, giving them a beged that's whole. It's interesting because beged, the reason why beged is called beged, because beged is a weave where we put threads next to each other. That's why it's made of Beis Gimel Daled. It's interlocking. Right? When we weave a beged, it's all interlocking. That's the same thing with a knot. A knot is a kesher kuf shin reish. It's tied together. Right? So that's the etymology of it. But now I want to go one step further. Why did the Shvatim have to rip their clothing? So if you remember, I told you from the Oitzer Plois that when it says by Yishalach that they sent the Kosnas Basim to Yaakov and said, Haken knows if this is Ksainas Bincha. So he said by Yishalach is a lotion of Cherev, because before they sent the Ksainas Basim, they took a knife and they cut it in jagged edges to make it look like an animal bit through it. So since they tore the big day Yosef, they had to have their begodim torn. Right? So that's a midah connected midah. The midah shad the midah didn't lie. Now I want to share with you a rayon that I had. I really like this pshat. But Aniyas Daite a cotton. But when I'm learning now Mishnah Yomis Pirkei Avos, I believe I have a siyata d'shmaya since there's so many listeners. And again, I can't say it enough times that if you want to do something together with your wife and family, you can listen to the Mishnah Yomis. It's a free service, 20 minutes a day. As I learned Pirkei Avos, 718-906-6471 is the direct number to call to listen to Pirkei Avos with your family. 2 Mishnayos a day. It's a little bit longer. Usually a Mishnah Yomis is about 15 minutes, but I'm doing it now in Pirkei Avos about 20 minutes. There's a lot to say on each Mishnah. And again, if you want to sponsor the Mishnah Yomis, it's $180 for a day, and it's heard all over the world. Again, we do not have a sponsor this week. If anybody wants to sponsor the share. We all know that Hillel says, it's a Gemara Masechta Shabbos, that someone, a guy approached Hillel, and this guy was way ahead of his time, because he sounds like a busy American. And he tells Hillel, teach me Kol HaTorah Kula while I'm standing on one foot. You know, that's like people today. You know, give me a drasha, but give it to me in 4.5 minutes. Right? Don't go over. Right? Could you do the daf maybe in 27 minutes? Yeah. Well, what if it's hard? No, any daf 27 minutes. Or maybe you'll do it in an hour. I'll put you on double speed. Could we do that? Right? People are in a rush. Right? They want that Torah quick. Right? Even though it says Mar b'yeshiva, Mar b'Torah. You want to have chachma. You gotta, like Rabbi Wein says, you gotta wear out the seat of your pants. There's no other way. Torah is niknas b'yeshiva. You gotta spend a lot of time. But anyway, this guy didn't have the time. He said, look, if you could sell it to me while I'm standing on one foot, you got me. If not, sorry guys, but I'm out of here. So Hillel was up to the task. Hillel said, what you hate, don't do to your friend. That's the whole Torah. V'idach pirusha. Everything else is just commentary. So Bapashtas, what he was telling him is what you don't like, that's a good barometer. What shouldn't you do to your wife? You don't like to be kept waiting, don't keep your wife waiting. You don't like to be shouted out, don't shout at your wife. You don't like to be ignored, don't ignore her. What you don't like, that's a good barometer. But I realized that in the second parak of Pirkei Avos, there's another Mishnah that Hillel says, and it's a parallel. It's a twin to this teaching. Because what does Hillel say? It says in Parak Beis Mishnah Vav, Af hu ra gulgalos achas shetzafa al pnei hamayim. He saw a skull floating on the water. Now, Hillel processed information different than we do. We see a skull floating in the water. Hillel processed information different than us. He saw a skull, and he waxed philosophical. And he said, Amallah, he addressed the skull. Al da'ataft, because you drowned someone, you caused someone to float. Atvayich, that's why you're floating. That's why you drowned. V'soif metayfayach yutufa. And at the end, the one who drowned you, the one who caused you to float, will also float. So what this Mishnah is saying is Mida K'nei Mida. Right? Because you drowned someone, that's why you drowned. Mida Shada Maidei Maidin Loi. And eventually, the one who drowned you is going to drown. You'll say, the one who drowned you is doing God's work. Right? That's what Paro tried to do. He said, look, why you blame me? I did your job. You said, I did a good job. Right? No, So Bapashtas, what Hillel is saying over here is Mida Keneged Mida. But now in light of this second teaching, we understand so much more what Hillel meant when he told the guy who was standing on one leg. He said to him, Madis Sani Lach, what you hate, L'chavrech lo yisavit, don't do to someone else. Because if you do it to someone else, it's going to boomerang back at you and you're going to get it. So if you hate being screamed at, don't scream at someone. Because eventually, for screaming at somebody, you're going to be screamed at. So anything that you really hate, make sure not to do. If you hate being ignored, don't ignore someone. Because one day you're going to be ignored. The wheels of justice turn slow. Because if they turn fast, then everybody wouldn't do it. But you should know, that's the idea of Madasani Loch L'chavrech lo yisavit. That's the concept. Because if the great boomerang of Mida Keneged Mida makes it that what you hate, don't do to someone else, because if you do it, eventually that's going to happen to you and you hate it. Vayikra, Yosef called out, Hoitziu kol ish me'alai. Everybody out. So Rashi tells us, Medrash Tanchuma, that Yosef put himself in great danger there. Because the brothers could have killed him. 10 brothers, they could have killed him. But he said, rather that I should die, like Tamar, rather that I should die, then my brothers should be embarrassed before the Egyptians that they sold me into slavery. So he said, Oitziu kol ish me'alai. You have to understand what a big thing. Not only did he give his life, but he gave his life for people that stripped him of his clothing naked and lowered him into a pit. They weren't concerned about his embarrassment. Who sold him into slavery? They treated him like a slave, like cargo. And they weren't worried about his embarrassment. And Yosef yet was so diligent about their embarrassment. Of course, there's another pshat over here. Famous pshat, I mentioned this before on these shiurim, that Oitziu kol ish me'alai, because as soon as they made peace with one another, as soon as there was achdus, there would be shechina. And in the presence of the shechina, there is no room for mitzvah. The Miller said one of the reasons why Kol Nidrei night is so special is because of the fact that there's achdus. Anu matirin lispal imavyonim. It's complete achdus. Everybody's meichel one another. That's tremendous. That's tremendously holy. That's Shechina. That's why the Shechina came down on Har Sinai, because keish echad b'leiv echad. When I saw that the Ten Kerav in the Sefer, I believe the name of the Sefer is Chemed Shleima. He says a different pshat. Yosef was about to chastise the brothers. So Yosef says, Hoitziu kol ish me'alai. He didn't say kol anoshim. He said kol ish. He says, before I chastise them, I have to take out all of my ish, all of my personal negias, any agenda that I might have. You want to be able to chastise people, you can't have an agenda. I have to take out all that is personal, and only then can I give them teichach. What a pshat. Bisvada Yosef Elachiv, says the Chidah, it's only the Chidah. Bisvada is Lashon HaAbdus. He informed them about the Abdus, that it was sold 4 times. Remember I told you, Pasim is Pasim, Potifa Sacharim, Yishmaelim, Midyanim. So Bisvada Yosef, Bisvada is Oisius Ha'avdos. Ula Aviv Shalach Kezais. The practical lesson. Ula Aviv Shalach Kezais Asara Chamorim. 10 donkeys, nice Mitzvah Mitzrayim, from the best of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was a superpower at that time. And he sent them 10 donkeys with the best of Egypt. V'eser Asayna, he sent 10 she-donkeys, nice and bar, v'lechem, umazan, la'aviv l'dorach. I mean, he sent them, he sent royal gifts. So the Eitzer Aploy says over here a fascinating thing. He says for 22 years, he wasn't able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of giving gifts to his father. So you'll say, what is this, a mitzvah? I heard of a birthday gift, an anniversary gift. What's a mitzvah? So he brings down, and I'll tell you, I was unaware of it, but it's a very good thing to know. Is a Medrash Rabbah, you could look it up in Bamidbar Rabbah, Perek Yud Zayin Aleph, Shaben Chayiv Litein Matonois La'aviv Mitab Mitzvahs Kibbut Avei. It's an Indian to give gifts to her parents because of Kibbut Avei. Of course, it's an Indian to give gifts to your spouse. That's Pasha. But there's an Indian to give gifts to parents. Here's a riddle. What kind of gift gives you Arichas Yamim? And the answer is gifts to parents. So it says Yosef jumped at the chance to make up for 22 years that he wasn't able to fulfill the mitzvah. Isn't that interesting? People could go through life and they didn't know. It's a mitzvah. It's a Ferish Medrash Rabbah and Bamidbar Yud Zayin Aleph. It's a mitzvah to give gifts to parents. You go into a store, what could I get my parents? It's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. Just, if you buy your parents a gift, make sure to buy your wife, your husband. Because a wife or a husband should never feel second best. Under the chuppah we make a commitment that from now on you're the most important person in my life. That should never be diluted. Vayomer Yisrael, Rav Oid Yosef Benichai. So it's interesting. The Trumas Hadeshin has a Sefer on Chumash, the Lekutei Maharai. And in his Sefer on Chumash, he says, when Yaakov said, Rav Oid Yosef Benichai, he was talking to Esav. And he called Esav Rav, not because he had smicha. Because the Torah says, V'Rav Yavoy Tzor. So he says to Esav, don't make any plans, Rav. Oh, Yosef Benichai, my son Yosef is alive, and once he's alive, I'm safe from you. Right? The famous pasuk. Well, you base Yaakov Eish, or base Yosef Lahava. Yaakov is the fire, Yosef is the flame, or base Esav Lakash, and then Esav becomes stubble. If Yosef is not around, then Esav has hopes. But he says, Rav, Esav, Yosef Chai! Yosef is still alive! So beat it! It's interesting, there are certain Ravs that are Ravs, there's certain Ravs that are Esav. Got to know the difference between a Rav and a Rav. I remember somebody telling me in the country, yeah, but Rabbi, you're a real Rabbi. There's different Ravs. There's a Rav and there's a Rav. You have no difference between a Rav that has smicha and a Rav that's Esav. It's interesting that the Chidah says Rav Oid Yosef Benichai. He says the gematria of Oid is 80. Because it says that Yosef was the longest reigning Moshel in the history of the Jewish people. He reigned for 80 years. From the age of 30 when he's taken out of the bar until 110 when he passed away. He was the longest reigning Moshel. And here Yaakov prophesied it when he said, Rav Oid Yosef Benichai. Oid is B'gematria 80. Interesting mabit over here. It says, the Mabit was asked a shaila from Damascus. There was a Beis HaChaim, a cemetery in Damascus, which had in its log that this family will make up a name of a family, the Franco family, make up a name. The Franco family has rights in the Beis Chaim for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. So now already, great-grandchildren wanted to also use the family plot. And the Beis HaChaim said, no, you're not eligible. It says that the purchase was made for the parents, the children, and the grandchildren. Your great-grandchildren, you're not eligible, you have to pay. So they went to the Mabit. And the Mabit paskin that they're eligible. Because B'nai Banim, great-grandchildren, are included in B'nai Banim. What's the raya? Included in Banim. What's the raya? Because it says in this week's parsha that Yaakov took down Banav or B'nai Banav, Itay, B'naisav or B'nais Banav, Haba Itay Mitzrayim. His sons, his grandsons, his daughters, his granddaughters. And then it counts a fourth generation. Because it says, together with him came B'nai Peretz. Peretz were the children, was a child of Yehuda. Or B'nai Peretz, Chetzer and V'chomo. So Yehuda was a child, Peretz was a grandchild, and Chetzer and Chomo were a great-grandchild. And they also came down to Mitzrayim. The Mabit quotes a Rashba in Kedushin. The Rashba in Kedushin says that there's a death penalty for Mavir, your children and your grandchildren to Moilach. So the Rashba says it's not only children and grandchildren, but even great-grandchildren and more are considered kibbanim. Very interesting Rashba. I will tell you that this is a matter of great controversy, because the Shvus Yaakov argues on the Mabit and says that only children and grandchildren are allowed to be buried. Great-grandchildren would have to pay. This is an interesting argument. Now I found a very, very fascinating Oitzer Yad HaChaim. Very interesting. So, I would tell you that I never saw it before, but you wouldn't be impressed because you know how many things I never saw before. But it says, V'nei Levi Gershon Kasa Merari. So we know there's a Beis Yosef that paskins that if Rachmana litzlan, a child dies before the bris, it happens. We had a close relative that baby was born healthy, and the child Loyalena contracted meningitis in the hospital and died before the bris. So the Beis Yosef Loyalena, the Beis Yosef says from Rabbeinu Gershuni that when they bury him, they circumcise him and they give him a name. And I know that's what our family did. They circumcised, it was my uncle that had the child. They circumcised the child in the cemetery and they gave him a name. So the Oitzer Yad Chaim says that he heard from Chevra Kadishas that had it from their Rebbeim, who had it from their Rebbeim, who had it from their Rebbeim, that the minig is to give the name Gershon. And why the name Gershon? Because this halacha that the Beis Yosef says that it's a mitzvah to mal the child before you bury him is from Rabbeinu Gershuni. So since the halacha is from Rabbeinu Gershuni, so therefore you give the name Gershon. It's interesting because I heard another Kabbalah. The Kabbalah that I heard is that the minig was to give a name from before the Dor HaMabul. Like Mr. Shelech, a name from before the Dor HaMabul. But the Ma'aseh is, I thought to myself that this minig of giving the name Gershon could be another two possible reasons. Number one, Gershon is a lashon of Gerushin, and this person has been divorced from the world. the baby. Or Gershon is the same letters as Sharu or Rishu Gan, that the child will live or dwell in the Gan, because this child goes straight to Gan Eden. So that's also a perfect explanation of Gershon. Alcha Gam Allah, and I will go up with you as well. Now we know that we don't have the faintest idea of all the secrets that are in the Torah. Now nowadays with computers, we have people that are able to teach us things because they could figure things out, but that these things could be seen without computers. The answer is we need computers because we don't have minds that are computers. In the olden days, the people's minds were computers, right? So the Chidah says, Gam Allah, that I will go out with you from Mitzrayim. So Gam in Atbash, Atbash is Aleph equals Taf, Beis equals Shin. Gam in Atbash, believe it or not, is Reishut, because you will leave, Klal Yisrael will leave Mitzrayim in 210 years. What's Allah? Allah in Atbash, it's amazing, is Zayin Chof Tzadik, which is 117. We know that the Kushi Ashibud was 117 years. So Gam is Atbash ratio, that's when you will leave. And Allah is Atbash ratio, Zayin Chof Tzadik, which is 117, because that's the Kushi Ashibud. Vayeser Yosef Merkaftoi, Vayal Likras Yisrael Aviv, Vayef Kal Tzavarei. This is very interesting. Yosef went up. He finally sees his father after 22 years. Hasn't seen his father, who he used to learn with morning, noon and night, his Ben Zekunim. Vayef Kal Tzavarei. Says the Targum Yonis and Ben Uziel, why do you think Yosef was crying? So if you ask this question to anybody, they'll tell you, I know why Yosef was crying. He was crying because he missed his father so much, and it was crying. It's a reunion. You hear stories about people that were reunited 25 years after the Holocaust, and they're crying like babies. So what do you think he was crying for? He was crying because he finally saw his father after 22 years. Says the Targum Yonis Ben Uziel, that's not why Yosef was crying. It's an amazing thing. Targum Yonis Ben Uziel says over here that when Yosef went to greet his father, he came with an entire retinue, with pages and squires and jesters. He came with a huge assemblage. And Yaakov thought that he was Paro. So he bowed down to him. And says the Targum Yonis Ben Uziel, because of this, Yosef lost 10 years of his life. He lost 10 years of his life. Why? He should have sent an advance scout to let Yaakov know that it's him. And because he didn't do this, and his father bowed down to him, he lost 10 years of his life. And that's why Yosef cried, because he was mortified that his great father bowed down to him. Now the lessons from here are so incredible. The first lesson is, there's a famous Mamloyes. The Mamloyes says, Kabed es avicha v'esimecha l'man yarichen yamecha. Asks the Mamloyes, why does it say l'man yarichen yamecha? We're supposed to do mitzvahs shelo yaman as l'kabel pras. So why does it say L'man Yericha Yamecha? Answers the Mamlayis, the main purpose is Mechlal Hein after Shemei Alav. That if you don't do it, Chas v'Shalom, you won't live long. Torah didn't want to say it, so it said it in the positive. The main reason is to tell you that it's deadly not to honor parents. And here you see how weit that goes, that Yosef's life was shortened because he didn't send an advanced scout. So he's being also mun that he didn't utilize Chachma. He's al Chacham Arayas Hanaylan. He didn't have the foresight to figure this out. And they asked, but what about the time that Yaakov, when he was on the sickbed and Yosef came and Yaakov bowed down? So he said, that wasn't Yosef's fault. There Yaakov made the decision. But here Yosef should have sent an advanced guard to let Yaakov know. But even more than that, what Yosef cried about was not the reunion. It's amazing. He wasn't crying at the reunion that he saw Yaakov. What overshadowed that was the Pekiah and the Kibbut Avaim. That's why he was crying. It's an amazing, amazing Targum Yonis and Menozil. Now, speaking about what could cause loss of life, we know that there's a very scary thing in this parsha that teaches us how careful we have to be with our words. How careful we have to be with our words. It says, Vayomer Yaakov el Paro, Yemei Shnei Megurai, Ma'at v'roim Yemei Shnei Chayai. I'm not as old as I look. Few and evil were the years of my life. And the Rebbeinu Shalom did not like it at all. The Rebbeinu Shalom did not like it one bit. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, Ani malataticha me'esav v'lovin. I saved you from Esav and Lavan. Ve'achzarti loch es Dina ve'es Yosef. And I returned to you, Dina. You know what could have happened with Dina with Shem? You know what could have happened to Yosef? 4 times sold with these rough men by Potiphar in the dungeon. And you say, Ma'at v'ram meishnei chayei. And you have, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explains, such a aged face that Paro has to ask you, how old are you? Those are 33 words. I'm going to deduct 33 years from your life, Lo Yaleinu. So although your father Yitzchak lived till 180, you'll only live till 147. Now it's interesting that there's another reason why he lost 33 years, also having to do with words. It says, Im es asher timtze Elohecha lo yichya. Im asher timtze Elohecha, with the one that you find, your gods, your trofim lo yichya. And because he inadvertently cursed Rachel, so therefore says the Baal HaTurim, Yichya. You should have said something else. Yichya, life? Because you said Yichya. Yichya is Bigmatria 33. You'll lose 33 years from your life. That's the Baal HaTurim. Either way, it has to do with something that he said, but there's 2 very important lessons over here. The first lesson is don't complain. Don't complain. Now the truth of the matter is that Yaakov had what to complain about. You know, Rebbeinu Shalom said, I saved you from Esav and Lavan. But he had a brother Esav and a Shver Lavan. I returned you Dinah and Yosef, but Dinah was raped and Yosef was away for 22 years. He also had his Rachel die very young, and Leah died very young. He had a rough life, Yaakov. He had a rough life. Don't complain. Complaining is dangerous. And people complain and complain and complain and complain. Criticize and complain, criticize and complain. You know, in my shul, I have a very good shul. In my shul, nobody wants to be president. Baruch Hashem, I have wonderful presidents. People don't want to be president because presidents, they say, all we get is complaints and criticism. I have somebody in my shul that bought a beautiful piece of plastic to put on the bima. And he worked very hard to cut it with precision. He said to me, you wouldn't believe how many complaints I got. Why is it plastic? Why isn't it glass? Why isn't it perfectly rounded? Why did you do it yourself? Why did you take it to a professional? A person does something, there was nothing there. He does something for the killer, and all he gets is complaints and criticism. You know, the famous teretz of why don't we have a zeicher for the man, the Be'er Shel Miriam? So the famous teretz is, it's Chidah's teretz, is that anything that we got via complaining, via loinu, isn't worth commemorating L'dayos. We never complained about shade. So now Nani Yaakov was given without complaining. Without complaining, that's worth commemorating L'dayos. A husband, a wife should know that complaining brings down significantly the aura of tranquility in the home. Complaining and criticism should be kept to a very, very, very small amount. Part of the bracha of the Chos and Kalish B'Bayin Abayis Nemam B'Yisrael is that there shouldn't be much complaining in the home. We have to work on that. The second thing we learn is don't curse people. People get angry. They say, for all the tzaras, you should get yours. Don't do it. We learned so many times in the Torah what happens. Sari Imenu passed away so many years before Avram. Avram ended up spending over 50 years with Keturah, with Hagar, not Sarah. Because she said, Chamosi olecha yishbeit Hashem beini ubeinecha. She was Moshe din al chaveira. Yaakov said, Im asher timtza es alihecha lo yichya. Yichya has been matir 33, he lost 33 years. Don't, I know you're angry. You should get by you like you caused me. Don't do it. Leave judgment to Hashem. Ki hamishpat le'elikim. Don't do it. Eradicate it from your whole back. Don't do it. You should see what it feels like. Don't do it. I hope you get to know what this is like. Don't do it. I know it says, so you're tempted to say, well, you should be in my shoes, and then you'll know, don't do it, don't do it. It's dangerous. 33 years for one word, for Yechia, don't do it. Rak admas hakohanim loikana. When Yosef bought up everything, mamish, he had the whole monopoly board. He bought everything. Just admas hakohanim loikana. He didn't take it. Ki choyklim Mitzrayim. So here again, the Targum Yonis ben Uziel says, most people understand that again, the ultimate chacham, the ultimate rayas hanoylid, Yosef was already fixing into the way of Egypt the exemption of the clergy. You know, I heard a court in Wisconsin now So this has big ramifications. I imagine that Aguda will get involved in this. A court in Wisconsin just outlawed parsonage. It used to be a Rav. The money he paid for his house wasn't taxable. It was parsonage. I just heard that a judge in Wisconsin is fighting this and declaring it not constitutional. It's not a separation of church and state. Yosef saw that there would be a time that the Bnei Levi should be exempted from the Shibud. L'chulasif lo seichem, your work, not the work of Paro, because Shevet Levi was exempted. Yosef already fixed this into the system by excusing the Admas HaKohanim. It's a pella, the Kohanim were Kohanim, they were what is he excusing to them? Rak Admas HaKohanim, it was paving the way for Shevet Levi. But that's not what the Targum Yonis and Merazil says. It's an amazing thing that the Targum Yonis and Merazil says. Yosef was exhibiting Hakaras HaTov. See, Hakaras HaTov was something, the biggest failure of Egypt, that they were able to do to the Zarei Shel Yosef, who saved the land. Without it, there would have been no food. Without Yosef, Egypt would have been a mass grave. There was no food. And that they should do to his descendants what they did during the Shibud was the ultimate ingratitude. Yosef, on the other hand, here was demonstrating incredible Hakaras HaTov. Says the Targum Yonis Menaziyah that Yosef HaTzadik, when he was accused by Ashes Potiphar, that she said he tried to have his way with me, they brought him to the court of the Kaimim, and the Kaimim said, let's examine the beged. And from the way it was torn, we could tell who attacked who. And they saw from the way it was torn that she jumped on Yosef, and therefore they exonerated him from death. Or another version is that she scattered egg, the egg white. She claimed that it was Zerah. And the Kaimim said, there's one version Medrash that it was Malach that said this, but this version is it was a Kaimim. The Kaimim said that if it's Zerah, it'll dissolve. If it's egg, it'll congeal. And it congealed. And they saved Yosef from assassination, from execution. He went into the dungeon so that the wife Potiphar shouldn't be embarrassed. That good they weren't. But because of Hakaras HaTov to the Kaimim, that's why he left them their land. You see Hakaras HaTov even to Oiv the Avodah Zarah. It's Targum Yonis and Menaziyah. By the way, the Tishbi, if you remember, I told you that there's a sefer that's expert at words besides the Ara, the Sefer Tishbi. Tishbi says, what's the etymology of the word Kaimer? He says two pshatim. He says one pshat is nichmeru, means blackened, and the Kaimim, the priest, wore black. That's one pshat why they were called Kaimer. Isn't that interesting? There were other black hiders. The other pshat in Kaimer, he says, Kaimer means hidden. Nitman. He says in the olden days the priests lived in what he called cloisters. Right? They lived like monks, hidden away from society. And that's why they were called Kaimer. So you know me, I look at a word, I like to weigh in on this. Kaimer is the same letters as Meicher. Right? Kaimer is Meicher. Because they sold out. They sold out. The whole world had a belief in one God, and they sold out. They believed in idolatry and paganism, so they sold out. That's like Kaimer's Meicher. They sold. Or it comes from a lashon of Chavav Mar. They were bitter to Chavav. Chavav is, of course, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Or Mar also means to exchange, like Tamura. They exchanged God. So these are all possibilities of the meaning of Kaimer. Okay, for those that are listening, whether it's my CD listeners, Koloshin, TorahAnytime.com. It's already 2 weeks now that we didn't have a dedicator. It's $300 to dedicate, $360 to be a postal sponsor. Tonight, first of all, over here, we could daven Ma'ariv right away if people get ready for it.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.